Nice, nice.
Yeah, and then
Very nice.
I've got left-hand Joan.
All right, so
Let's talk about
it
Lily.
is now 4:05, and I think it's probably a good time to just go ahead and get going here.
Okay.
Oh, I love that. That's it.
Oh, yeah,
The fighting background is a great background.
That's my golf background.
Nice.
That's Lucian. That's me. This is some big guy who standing on the sideline.
You know, at the time. All right. Rhianwen's going to talk about tents, so you guys don't distract me. I'm listening.
I'm too tense.
Well, so I'm sitting here and I have the computer, and then all Joan and Joe and Ingvar and Eisen are on the other side of the computer, like making faces at me.
I think they should be in the camera so that we can see them.
Right, you got to pull them out of the peanut gallery.
Faces. I want to see your faces. I haven't seen your faces in months.
All right, all right.
It's getting real now.
Is that enough? Is that no? Oh, it's nice to see you, Hugo. What do you have on your head?
It's garb, obviously.
Yeah, no, that's such garb.
Totally historic now. Yep.
That's very garb.
Oh, yeah.
My pepperoni.
Oh, I love it.
I made pepperoni.
It's real good.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to Chatting with Catalina, not Catalina with Catalina. It's Chatting with Catalina. What I wanted to do was to create a way for us to talk to people and pick their brains about the thing or activity or art or service that they are most known for. And today we have Mistress Rhianwen with us. And we'll go through a little bit of her history in the SCA, and then we'll talk about how she became a tent maker and her process there. So first, if you go ahead and put it on speaker view, you'll be able to hear whoever the speaker is will be the biggest picture you see the entire time. And also go ahead and keep yourselves on mute. I'll give you time to ask questions. And when that time comes, you're welcome to unmute yourself at that time. All right, so what is your introduce yourself to us, Mistress Rhianwen.
Hi, I'm Rhianwen Verk Bran up Gruffdd.
And was that the first name you had in the SCA?
Yeah, I've always been Rhianwen. There was a very brief moment when I was Rhiannon, but the heralds told me that I could have either my coat of arms or my name, and I had worked a lot harder on my coat of arms, so I changed my name.
Why were you given a choice? Like, why couldn't you have both?
Heralds are mean. No. As it turns out, now I literally picked my name out of a book of Welsh fairy tales because I liked the way it sounded, and that was all the thought that had gone into it. And as it turns out, I have a seahorse, front half horse, back half fish on my coat of arms, and Rhiannon was a horsey fishy birdie goddess. And they said, if you have a goddess's name, you can't have anything pertaining to the goddess on your coat of arms. So you can have one or you can have the other. And I'm like, well, I will just change my name. And so I thumbed through the armorial at the time and found Rhianwen, which had a very similar sound to it, and went with that.
I like it. That works. So if I wanted to name myself Diana, I couldn't have a bow and arrow?
Right. Or a deer or a moon or anything like that.
And well, damn it, there goes my future.
I know.
Just kidding. So right now you're living in Barony of Three Rivers. Can you tell us a little bit about the different shires and baronies and your travels through the known world? Where have you lived?
Sure. So I started at Standing Stones, along with a few other people near and dear to everyone's heart.
So tell
And
us a little bit about that time. A few other people. Who did you start with?
I started with Magda. She actually when she was Meredith, and Sheila, Severin, of course Donegal, and Tristram. That whole bunch, you know. And you know, I really came because it looked like it was something interesting to do, and stayed because of the people, you know. And I've been fortunate to have gotten involved with a really great group of people at the beginning, and you know, they've been my friends for the last 30 years now. So it was a really good experience. Yeah,
So-
it is a straight up cast of shady characters. And Drixos, we have to include Drixos with that. So,
Right.
yeah, he was definitely a part of the shady cast of characters in the beginning as well. From there, let's see. So I moved to Batavia from there, and because of a guy, you know, I was married to Gabe at the time, and was Baroness of Batavia for a while there. And then migrated back to Standing Stones, and then St. Louis, here in Barony of Three Rivers. So I did have a couple of years where I was outside the kingdom, but I really only participated in Calontir activity. So I came back frequently enough that I don't think people even realized that I lived in Michigan or I lived in Delaware. So just couldn't
Right.
see my family. You know?
We are one big O family.
Yeah.
It is amazing. So you said you've been in the SCA for 30 years. What year did you join?
Oh gosh, I want to say that's a hazy past, but I want to say it was probably 86 or 87.
Okay.
It was just a flyer in my dorm, and I thought, well, that looks interesting. I'm going to go check it out, and was just hooked.
So that was going to be my next question. You know, how did you find it? Just a fly. There was a flyer hanging up on the wall in your dorm.
There was a flyer hanging up on the wall of the dorm, and I went to a newcomers meeting, and you know, the rest is history, really. Standing Stones was extremely active at the time. We met every week. We had one business meeting a week, and then three what we called program meetings, where we had an arts and science topic that was discussed every time. We had guest speakers, professors often, or somebody presenting on something that they knew. And then we had fighter practice probably twice a week. It was always on Sunday, and then often on Wednesday as well. So we were a very, very active group.
That's very active.
Yeah.
How did you guys make it through college?
I don't know. I have no idea what we did. You know, and then on Wednesday nights we would get together and sew, and that's really when Magda kind of took me under her wing and showed me how to operate a sewing machine, and that's really how I got going with sewing.
Right. So how did you settle on your persona? Just because of your name, or?
Yeah, really. My persona is not really that well developed. I don't have a big history like a lot of folks, but I really just like the way Welsh names sounded, and you know, the spelling was fascinating. I mean, Welsh is such an obscure, you know, language that has no vowels, that it just kind of fascinated me. And so that's where I picked my name. I started kind of as a 12th century person and hung out in the 14th century for a little bit. And then in recent years, I've actually become more interested in the Saxon period. And so now I'm claiming that I've actually from about the year 900 and just kind of near the Welsh border. So, and hence my name.
They have very comfortable clothes. Saxons do. Very comfortable clothes. Right, so I'm going to take a moment to pause here to see if anybody has any questions about Rhianwen's history in the SCA. All right, I'm going to move on then. So you're most known, you got your laurel for tent making, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, that's what I had thought. I wanted to make sure I wasn't just assuming.
Yeah.
Who was the first person who inspired you to make a tent?
Strangely, Andrixos.
And
So-
Drixos. How did that happen?
So when I was in Stones, there was going to be a big event in my life, and the Shire got together and made a tent for me, as a congratulations. And Drixos had done all of the sewing. And you have to realize this is back in the time when, the way we would get to an event is we'd pile 6 people into Drixos's Ford Escort and strap the purple pavilion on the roof and, have our sock full of change. And that's pretty much how we got there. So he made me a tent. I mean, mostly at that point we had a lot of people camped in mundane tents. Medieval tents were actually pretty rare during that time period. And it was nice. It was kind of a russet colored. It was an octagonal, and it was made of a nice poly cotton because that's really all we could afford. Mm-hmm. Well, because tent making really wasn't that much of a thing back then, it leaked. So we didn't realize that poly cotton would leak. And so I made a roof for this tent out of a cotton canvas that I had waterproof with Thompson's water seal. And it, for all the world, looked like a cupcake with icing on it.
Do you have pictures of this?
I wish I did. I don't know. I couldn't find any. And then I realized that it was really like too small because it was not a big tent. And so I wound up cutting the roof in half, putting a couple of panels in the middle of it so it was more or less an oval shape, and then making walls for it. Well, at that point I lost track of the little russet tent. I actually think I might have given it to Tristram or Donegal, but I'm not sure what happened to it.
Donegal says no.
No, okay, I must have given it to Tristram then. So I have a vision of it in the basement of the ship where they all lived. So
in the basement of the ship where they all lived?
That's what they called the house. So,
oh, okay.
Yeah.
What is this story? All
yeah.
right.
So that was my first tent. It was something that actually evolved by parts.
So I was going to ask, when you first started making tents, what was your goal? Other than making a tent for bigger, what was your main goal when you first started making tents?
Well, when I first started making tents, my goal was to have a place to live, essentially, that didn't leak. So I, had put that together, and then at the end of it, I was like, okay, well, I don't think I'll ever do this again. And then I thought, well, I might do it again. And then I think the second tent that I was involved with, there was an incident at a fighter practice that involved the breaking of a large mirror, and we had to figure out how to pay for that. So the Shire got together and made, I kind of led the project, and we made a tent to raffle off in order to pay for the damages that we had done. So
there's a guilty party on the other side of my computer over here, raising his hand, taking responsibility for that damage.
There may have been a bastard sword flying through the
Huh.
air.
Maybe. So when you the first time you put some canvas through a machine, how did you get started doing that? Did you have to buy any special things to make that happen?
No, I did about my first 30, and 30 if you count shade flies, on just like this old, well, it wasn't even old, it was this kind of plastic Singer's sewing machine that I had bought at like Walmart or something like that. It didn't really do the sewing machine too good, but it was possible. It was totally possible. And I mean, and that's a myth that I would like to dispel. It's like a lot of people say, well, I'd like to make a tent, but I don't think my sewing machine will handle it. It's like, it probably will, especially if you have one of the old, metal Singers that, from the, 50s or 70s or so. before they started putting.
So you want something that has metal components,
But if you
basically.
have a good tough sewing machine, you can make a tent on it.
Cool.
I've since upgraded, but yeah, it's just, and you just have to be able to plan the sewing out, so you're never really putting any more than a single panel of the tent through the arm of the sewing machine. So with good planning, you can do it. You totally can.
So what machine do you have now? You said you've upgraded.
Yeah, right now I have a 1912 Singer industrial machine that runs like a dream. It's got a 1/2 horsepower motor on it. It goes forward. That's it. But I do all my sewing on that, and it's wonderful.
So when you say 1912, it's a machine that was built in 1912?
Yep,
So it is over a century old.
that's correct. And it runs perfect. I mean, something
Do you-
falls off of it every so often, but you have to put it back on. But
Do you do your own maintenance on it?
mostly, yeah. There are actually a lot of places that will service an old machine.
Okay.
I know in Kansas City there was like one old guy that would come around and fix your machine. He made house calls, and that's basically
Oh.
what he did. Here in St. Louis, there's a couple of places that that you can just take the machine and they fix it. And they have a back room filled with old machines that they found at auctions and barns and things like that. And they take parts off of it and put it onto your machine.
Okay. All right. So again, I want to take a short pause to see if anyone has any questions about starting out tent making.
So I've got one for you, Rhianwen.
Yeah.
I can't talk, apparently. Rhianwen?
Right.
Yeah, that's my attempt at pronouncing Welsh, apparently. And this can totally be something that can be taken offline as well. As I don't mean to turn into Hugo has lots of dumb questions land. But where do you sit on, hey, hypothetically, if there was someone who was named not Hugo and was putting off investing in a tent for several years, kind of is feeling the need to kind of make that jump. Buying commercially feels weird in the historical canvas tent space because it feels like it's all just a bunch of small families, mom and pop shops who are making this stuff. But buying something from one of those tent making mom and pop shops, or just going completely custom, is there pros or cons to both of those? Do you have any?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm really glad you asked it, actually. So one of my frustrations in the NCA is that everybody seems to want kind of an American Revolution or Civil War style tent, which are really good tents, but just because it's canvas doesn't mean it's period. And so, but if that's what you want, if you want either like we'll call them Roman style tents, but they're really more like Civil War tents or Revolutionary War tents. Or you want the A-frame, which is a period style. I mean, it's basically period for every period, because pretty much every people figured out that if you put a piece of cloth across a beam and then maybe put doors on that, you had a tent. But if that's what you want, then really, and you just want it in white, really, I may as well just buy one from Panther or Fall Creek Sutlery or something like that, because I can't make one for less than they sell them for, and they do good work. Those two places especially. I mean, I've seen their work, especially in recent years, and it's solid. It's a solid tent. It's going to last you probably 10 years. If, on the other hand, you want something that matches your persona, what you should do is do a lot of research. And Hugo, you have so many pictures of tents right there in the array of museums that are behind you. I mean, like basically every Dutch painting has 1,000 tents in it, and they're all wonderful. you know, figure out what you want or what your persona would have camped in, and go ahead and either make it yourself or get with somebody who knows how to do that, help you plan out, and I'd be happy to do that, actually. And we can lay it out and put one together. You know, it's
so my second question right on top of that then is super boring logistics sizing question. So I think, as we all know, the longer you're in the SCA, the more you accumulate lots of random stuff. And I've been rolling solo dude for several years, and I'm in a weird, unexpected, very lovely life situation now where that might feel like it's, you know, changing, and you know, that's fun. But now it's like my thoughts were, okay, well, I'll just plan on like whatever is kind of persona appropriate, historically, you know, plausible and correct. One dude plus random SCA stuff size. But now I'm moving into, okay, now we might have to be thinking about two people's stuff. And this totally could be an off-the-air question and answer, but what sizing, like, is there some basic thoughts on, you know, one person, two person plus stuff to two person plus a lot of stuff? Is there like common thoughts or sizes around that?
There are some. Well, okay, so the secret of sizing with a tent is that to figure out how big to make a tent. I personally am way more comfortable in a tent that I can stand up in. So the height. And then you have to think about the tent form. So if you are doing like an Anglo-Saxon gatelled, or what they call a French bell wedge tent, the area in which you can stand up is pretty small. And then, but if you want a place where you've got headroom, then you have to think about, you know, if my tent is 10 feet tall, what is the right shape for that tent? Because you don't want it to be too vertical and you don't want it to be too flat or anything like that. So to get the proportions to look right. So height is one thing to consider. And then as far as footprint, I would start with like, how big is your bed? And then figure enough room around to get around that. And that would be your minimum size. And you don't want your bed to touch the walls in any direction. So I'd start there and then scale up. The other thing about tent sizing is you kind of start with if you're making your own, you start with a concept of what size and shape you want to make it, and then you sketch it out on graph paper, and then you figure out how you then you figure out how wide your fabric is, because you want to do it in full panels. You don't want to get into this business of like, okay, well, I need this to be 32 feet wide, and so I'm going to cut this panel in half, and, you know, just go in full panel increments.
Gotcha.
So. And
are those panel widths ranging depending on the type of like canvas you're picking up, or does it come pretty standardized, like 48 inches, 60 inches?
Yeah, it's usually all the standard canvas or widths. It's usually either 36 or 60 wide, you know, plus or minus. Like it's usually like 58/60 or, you know, 36, you know, 35, 36 or something like that. So it's not as precise as making garb. So like if you can call 36, you know, a 36-inch wide bolt 3 feet, you know, and then if you're a few inches off when it's 15 feet long, that doesn't matter.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Thanks.
No worries.
That was a good question. Really good question. Anyone else before I move forward? All right. So I want to know, what tent is your favorite tent that you have made?
Most recent version of the Purple Pavilion.
Okay.
And that is because of what it means. You know, it's the kingdom's living room, you know, it's where everybody comes to gather. It's the gathering place, you know, and just the being entrusted with making the kingdom a home is, I'm going to tear up now. I mean, you know, that is something that that is a huge honor, you know. And so being able to do that, I mean, it's really super meaningful to me, you know, because a tent is a home, and to give the people I love a place to be together.
So the most recent version, what number is this for Purple Pavilions?
Oh, Kurt could tell you. I don't remember. So I've made.
Well, that you've made.
I think I've made 4.
Okay.
And then I know Kirk did 2, and then there were 2 before that, I think. So I think that's.
How much research goes into making the Purple Pavilion or any of your more period style tents that you've made? Yeah,
so researching tents is actually hard. Andy's, well, it's different than a lot of research, I think. So there's a few extant examples of tents. Most of them are post-period. And so the forms of the tents probably aren't different than the post-period examples, but like there is no intact Roman tent, for instance, and there's really no intact Anglo-Saxon Getalt. And the problem with researching tents, especially the earlier period ones, is that these are not photographs, these pictures that we have. They're very stylized. And so trying to tell if something is rounded on the ends or flat on the ends is very difficult. So telling just what the shape of the tent is actually pretty challenging. And so researching a tent is really a process of building something and seeing if it's structurally sensible. You know, if it stays up in weather or wind or whatever. I think I was one of the first people to do sloped walls on tents, because most of the tents at that time period were, you know, you could like spend a whole lot of money and buy a tent from a commercial tent maker. You get this oval tent, and they had the straight walls. And I was like, all those pictures have slanted walls. I'm going to do some slanted walls, you know, and then I realized like how much more stable the tent was with the slanted walls, and how much more space you had in it, because, you know, you have this slanted wall where you're not going to put all your stuff there, and then you had all this walking around space. I'm like, oh, that's why they did that.
Well, and also the slanted walls, the wind kind of doesn't push directly on them.
Right. Yeah. And the wind slips around it. You know, it's so much more. It's like the amount of more stable is really incredible. So, you know, so it's really a matter of like seeing something in a picture and then trying to build that, and then seeing how that worked. And you're like, well, this doesn't make any sense. I wonder what that really was. And then trying to build that, you know. I've even tried like doing a stylized tent, you know, like the tournament tents that you see that have little dormer windows and all of that. I did one of those.
How did that come out?
It was really good, actually. It was really cute. And
how did you get the dormer window to stand up?
So I did. It had a cross beam in it that up at the top that supported the peaks of the dormers that went in each direction.
Okay.
And then it just kind of stood up from there. I just built it so that it would stand up if you had the cross beam. I think I had some little pieces that kind of went out like this to give it a little more form this way.
Okay.
Yeah, it looked pretty good, actually. I was surprised. I'm not sure they ever did that in real life, because again, these are pictures that people drew of tournaments, and I think things got stylized a lot in those illuminations.
That never happens. Never.
Yeah.
No one ever stylizes anything.
Right.
Like the Cantigas or the Alfonso, the games where they're playing chess on the wall, basically.
Exactly, like that one, you know, and no center pole. Obviously held up by magic.
Magic. So, well, my question was going to be, how long have you been making tents since you made your favorite, before you made your favorite tent? But it's the most current one you've made.
Right, yes.
Right, so
I think,
that's 30 years?
yeah, probably. And, you know, maybe my next one will be my favorite then too, you know.
Is there a live-in tent that you, that is your favorite?
The cobbler's children have no shoes, so my tents are often awful.
What about one that you've made for somebody else that you've thought you've been very proud of?
Well, the dormer window thing was pretty good.
Okay.
That also had the person's coat of arms and stuff on it. Joe Angus's church tent, cathedral tent, was a lot of fun to make.
With the four wings and the checkered and
with the
yeah.
four wings and the lozengey doors and the big chess people on the side of it and everything. That was a lot of fun to make. Unfortunately, it was not structurally intelligent. So, but I think that was, when I get to do something that isn't just another, you know, quote unquote Roman tent, I'm really happy. I make whatever people are asking for, because if the tent of their dreams is a Roman tent, then I will make them that. But I encourage everybody to really look at what your persona would have camped in and then make that, because, you know, you spend all this time on your garb and your armor and, you know, all of your accoutrement. You know, why not camp in what your persona would have camped in?
I'm a fan.
Right. I lived under the Roman for a long time, but I had an actual Roman in there at the time. So
Right. All right, so making the last pavilion that you made, how long did it take you to plan it?
Well, the purple pavilions, I don't really have to plan anymore. I have a, you know, I mean, I know how they put them together. I just see that one in my head, you know. I'll sketch it out on graph paper, or I'll just look at one of my old plans for the purple pavilion. So that doesn't take too long. I mean, planning out a tent is really a matter of knowing about 3 geometric formulas. I mean, you have to know the Pythagorean theorem, and you have to know how to calculate a radius of a circle. And that's really about it.
All right, for someone who hates math, what do you suggest they do to get past that point?
Well, you can ask a friend, you know, or we can sit down and do tent math together. The one thing, well, you know what, and a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to make a tent because I can't handle the math. The answer is you can handle the math. It's not really complex once you break it down into smaller pieces. And you just have to understand that you have to think in 3 dimensions. And that's a little hard for some people. Some people's brains are wired that way and some people's are not. But if you think about the fact that things are on a slope and you have to calculate the length along a slope, you'll get the math right. And there are always people that I will be happy to help anyone with tent math or show how that works. But it's not advanced calculus, and you don't need anything more than a standard calculator that you find on your phone for it.
Awesome. What tools would you recommend somebody have before they start making a tent?
Right, good question. So I would recommend an old sewing machine. Well, okay, if you're going to do it in a period fashion, I have never tried to do a tent in a completely period fashion because I'm not, well, all of my tents have been made under duress. You know? So, oh, a terrible tornado has taken away the purple pavilion. I have to make a new one. So I've never hand sewed a tent. If you're going to hand sew it, you need salesmakers tools, essentially, big needle, big cord, thread, the sailmaker's palm, and you're gonna stitch, and that's how you would have done in the Middle Ages. If you want to work faster than that, I would recommend a sewing machine, and get an old one from, you know, a garage sale or an estate sale or something that's got a metal body and metal gears in it. And I think you'll be fine. You know, or if you want to hang out in my craft room and use my industrial, I'm happy to have people over. The other things that I'd recommend, or when you plan your tent, think about the lines of tension and reinforcement. Now, in the Middle Ages, they would have used, instead of webbing, they would use webbing, but it would be like sewed together strips of fabric. And they would put webbing along lines of tension. I just use this, you know, which is a nice webbing that you can get commercially, because like this is like 2,800 pounds of tension strong. If you reinforce very strongly, yeah, exactly. Basically, I put it along any line of tension. So like if I'm going to have like with a round tent, I'll have one of these going from the top to the edge where the rope or the pole attaches. Okay, so all of the tension is along the webbing, not on the fabric, and that'll make it last longer. It'll also make it stand up to wind better. So I recommend reinforcing. And if you want to go all period, make your own webbing out of several layers of cloth. If you want to cheat a little, get you some nice webbing. Also, if you have an industrial machine that'll hand it, I'd recommend good thread. So this comes in increments of 5,700 yards. So there's several miles of thread on one of these.
When it comes to thread has a TEX rating, TEX rating. What one do you use?
I could tell you if I knew what that meant.
It's the thickness or the strength of the thread.
It's 10 pounds.
10 pounds. Okay.
Yeah. So this is like, you can't break this with your hand without cutting yourself. It's also a special type of thread that doesn't wick. So when you put thread through a hole in fabric, it will tend to suck water through. And so this doesn't absorb the water. And so it will tend to not wick. And so you won't get as much leakage along seams if you use a non-wicking thread. Let's see, and graph paper. You need graph paper and a calculator for your plan. So I usually use like a big grid. Oh, you totally can't see that with my background.
Nope, it disappeared.
And if you will, some graph paper. So, and I usually just, I'll do a scale drawing with like, these are about a quarter inch grid, maybe a little more, with one grid square per foot, and I get it all planned out. And that's really about it. Okay. For laying the tent out, you need a very large area, like a driveway. And then I'll, for cutting the diagonals, I'll use a chalk line. So I'll conscript some poor passerby to hold the other end of the chalk line so that I can do my measuring, so I can cut along a diagonal line.
What did you learn during your last project?
Let's see, what did I learn in my last project? If you want to put lettering around a valance, don't get Fernando and Endrixos involved, or you'll wind up doing twice as much as you thought you would. If you are taking your valance project with you on a business trip and planning on sewing it in your hotel room in Fairbanks, Alaska, don't forget the electrical cord to your sewing machine.
Those are good reminders. Those are
Right.
good reminders.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the best advice is to pace yourself. I do most of my tents under duress, and I'm like, you know, I'll come home from working for 8 or 10 hours, and then I have to sew for another 4 or something to get things done. And I think that it's better if you can go at a more measured pace, so you don't have to. So there shouldn't be any stress involved. This is the process of creation, and so you want to give yourself enough time to get it done, and then do all the little embellishments and things like that that you might want to make it look really, really nice and something that your persona would have camped in.
So if you were to go back and be able to talk to young Rhianwen before she started making tents, what would you tell her?
I would say, girl, choose an art that's portable. So yeah, the downside of being a tent maker is that you're mostly alone. You know, a lot of people have hand projects that they sit around and do and chat with one another. You know, Magda and I call it, we're engaging in handicrafts. Well, tent making is really more of a construction project. And so, whereas you can kind of get other people involved in the project, by and large, you're by yourself because of the sheer volume of fabric. So, I mean, other than that, I mean, I've always been fascinated by tents. I mean, even when I was a little kid, I would just like look at pictures of tents and dream that I was going camping in them. So I think that, you know, I think that I probably would not have done it differently, but I think I probably would have adopted a second craft so that I could be social.
You know, you could still do that.
I yes. And as soon as I get all this autocrating stuff out of the way, I totally am doing that.
Right. I mean, maybe the service was your social handicraft.
Perhaps, yeah.
Perhaps.
That's probably true.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take a quick pause for questions again. Any questions about this last little portion that we talked about? About making the purple pavilion or tools that you need to make it. All right.
Every purple pavilion has a secret message in it, but you have to find it.
I have to find it, or whoever's listening?
Whoever's listening. You probably know it.
I think I do.
Yeah.
So, and then I have one last question to ask you.
Sure.
Having been in the SCA for 30 years, you understand that sometimes we get tired, we might get a little burnt out, but everyone that I know of has something that brings them back, some little magical moment that reminds them why they love this game and why they play this game. What's yours?
Well, I mean, really every time that we get together in the Purple Pavilion or the courtyard or something like that, and we sing together. For me, like sitting around a fire or sitting around the pavilion and singing together and just being together or fighting together or sitting in a circle and talking about our handicrafts together. You know, for me, the SCA is really less about the Middle Ages and more about the people that are involved, because I love them. You know, they're an incredible group of people that, you know, that I just want to keep coming back to, you know, and so I like leaving a big event, you know, I'm always inspired with all this energy of doing all of these things that, you know, because like people are doing all these incredible works and, you know, and they have such passion for them and everything. And it's always inspiring. So really when I get to a point where it's like, oh man, I've got to pack and I've got to get in the car again and I have to drive for hours and hours and hours, and then I have to set up my tent in the rain and the dark, and then we're going to be bitten by things, and you know, and we're going to be cold and we're going to be hot and all of that. And then just getting together with all the people, you know, I mean, it takes all of that away every single time. And I'm always glad that I've done it. I don't think I've ever regretted going to an event because I come away, you know, feeling rejuvenated by it. So I just remind myself, you gotta go where the people are.
It makes it all worth it. It really does. All right, so I have one more thing before we finish up. We have a couple of guests with us today who have a little something they want to talk about. So I'd like to welcome Mistress Eleanor and Saeed Maz so that they can talk about their project that they have going on.
Hello,
Hi.
friends.
I was like, we didn't plan out who was talking first, so I'm gonna imagine you. Go, Eleanor.
Okay. So,
Great. So I hear you two have a big project that you're working on and that you need help. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
so our project is called Calontir Story Core, and it's loosely modeled on the Library of Congress's project that is called Story Core, where regular people record stories from their life to create connections and create a more passionate world. That's their mission. But our project is a little bit different in that we want to record the stories of the populace and experiences of Calontir to create an archive of our history as a kingdom.
Yeah. I think one of the things that really excites me about this is the fact that I think that Eleanor and I have slightly different reasons for like end result of what we want to do with it. But the underlying thing is the fact that, as we know, every time we sing No No Beast, there's another story gone. And I had the pleasure, so Master Meletis is my laurel, and in addition to being a bead maker, he is also a lovely big history nerd. And so while working on a project about a story about Baron Cormac the Badger, he sent me Valen's listserv folder. So I got access to this, and Rhianwen's laughing. She knows what's in some of that. It's a crazy file that talks about sleeping in the van for 24 hours at a time at Lily's Gate with a keg in it, because that was the only way to get people to work troll. They were doing 24-hour troll shifts with a keg in a van to get people to work troll. And I think that while stories about Phaedra's Gate and these big moments, the thunderstorm where Pavel got hit by lightning, these moments are really important, but those small things get lost. And we want those stories. We want all of the little sort of nuggets, and from shiny hats to those who don't, you know. And I think that people have this thought that it's like, oh, I haven't done anything neat enough to be remembered, and that's just not true.
What are your guys' end goals with this project? Like, what do you want to have when it's done?
So ideally, it will be recordings and maybe some text editions for people who don't want to, you know, talk on a recording or on a video, and it will be source material for other Calontir and other Scadians to use to make medieval style stories that are about our own history. And so the reason that I personally started looking into this is because I want to make an illuminated history of Calontir, but past Master Cragg's histories of our founding and Ferd's books of war stories, there really isn't a whole lot for the past 35 years.
Right.
And like, I've been present for 20 of those 35 years and have witnessed so many fun moments that I feel like need to be recorded. And I feel like it should be something that the entire kingdom is invested in.
So how can we help you guys achieve this goal?
Well, ideally, one thing would be to spread the word to everybody. You know, shiny hats, really anybody, who's been part of the kingdom, for more than, I don't know, a year, who gets Calontir, and tell them to share or ask them to share their experiences with us.
Yeah, be careful about saying tell them to this group of people.
I know.
This group of people, when it's time to tell people, Severin, I love you. Damn it.
So do you have an example of the type of story that you're looking for?
So, really just about anything. We had a Zoom thing last weekend that was sparsely attended. My mother,
Yeah.
bless her heart, was the only attendant.
I was there.
And well, yes, but you were also the host.
I don't count.
But I mean, you do, but not in this context. And she told a very lovely story about when she and my father went to Panzik for the first time ever in 2012. There was a storm, and everybody had put down their shade flies because, of course, they all saw it coming because we're from Calontir and we don't do things until the last minute. So they all put down their shade flies, and then when everything passed and people started putting things back up, their Majesties at the time, Hersh and Magda, came around with a group of people and helped people put up their shade flies and get their camps back in order. So, and she thought that was just a wonderful illustration about how Calontir, sort of from the top on down, is just a family and about helping each other, and I don't know, just how Calontir is Calontir.
It's almost like word fame for the kingdom.
Yeah.
Like it's sort of an odd thing because like when she told that story, I was really touched because I think that's the meat and potatoes of what I'm at least looking for. I mean, we already know the big stuff, right? Like that's the stuff we're going to keep telling. And again, it needs to be recorded. And I think that, like you asked earlier, like what our end goals are. I want to write the Alcira Calontir. There's it's basically Alcira were historical texts / narratives about families, and I've always thought that applied really well to Calontir. And so whether it's through a lens that I have a tendency to use of more of a Persian sort of storytelling, but before that happens, we just need to know what the hell happened.
Right. And we don't even have a lot of the big stuff
written down
from at least the last 10 years. I mean, there's been a lot of history and a lot of stuff happened, and just nobody's put it down.
Yep.
Well, maybe I'll tell you guys about a pretty epic reign about a year ago.
Yeah. See, stuff like that. That's exactly what we need.
It is. when
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
it tells me that, like, Calontir, the reason why there isn't anything written down except Master Craig's histories and then Fernando's war stories is because, I mean, we're very strongly an oral tradition.
Right.
Yeah. And so, I mean, capturing it orally is I think, is the way to go, because that's how we I mean, we're possibly one of the last oral traditions in the world, because everything is written communication. I mean, we don't even pick up a phone anymore to talk to each other. We text, you know. So
there's actually an entire project in the Middle East right now called the Hakawati Foundation, which is an organization that's a nonprofit that is trying to recapture Middle Eastern oral storytelling because it's gone in most places, like flat out. And
yeah, exactly. And I feel like I mean, you know, and having been in the SCA for as long as I have, you know, there are some stories that like just don't get told and retold because, you know, new stories have come. And that's fine. That's how an oral tradition works. But, you know, there really are a lot of old gems out there, like the beer keg, you know.
man, that entire, my first Lilies was 95. And so to know that was not that far before that, like that, it was not that long before 95 that it's like looking at, and it was all like Juno email listserv threads. It's that like, oh man. And so Eleanor, this started a year ago, and Eleanor and I both had an idea for a project that were different. She was like, I want to do an illustrated or an illuminated manuscript of the history of Calontir, and I was like, I want to ask every single person in the kingdom for 3 stories, because that's my. I want 3. I want something you saw happen, something you heard happened, and something that happened to you.
Yeah, and I think it's important to give people story starters, because it's like, it's really super intimidating. I mean, I've seen your posts, and it was super intimidating for me to go, like, what
do
story
I tell?
If you just want to hear a story, you know. But if you tell me, you know, if you ask me, well, tell me about the days when blah 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 blah, I'm gonna be, you know, I'll be able to come up with like, well, there was that one time that like the Shire got together and we had to make a tent, and you know, and
that was like,
you know,
that right there. I was like, wait a minute, broke a mirror, and so we had to pay for something. Like,
yeah.
I want that.
This isn't the first time Donegal's broke something because his sword fell out of his hand. Or the only. I'm going to say the only. You guys, we've hit 5
fell out of his
o'clock.
hand at a mirror.
We've hit 5 o'clock, and that is the end of our time. Is there anything else that we need to know about your guys' program or project?
So we periodically post the link to the sign up. If you have a story you want to have, a particular story you want to relate, we are scheduling sort of Zoom hangouts where people can just come and bullshit and ask each other things like Rhianwen was expounding on, and you know, sort of organically get stories that way.
Yeah, and I think that's right, you know. And then once we're able to see each other again, probably like you'll get a lot of stories if you just circulate at events and say, oh, that's a really great story, could you tell me more about that?
Go ahead.
Yeah, we had actually had an entire setup at Crown Tournament when Anton won to do that, and had just not publicized well enough. And then after he won, Eisen and I were just kind of all consumed by
you got a little bit busy.
It's like you guys agreed to do something, or a few things.
Not again.
Yeah, I think we had talked about like what we would hope to do, especially on day-long events, is set up like a couple of hours as a chunk, like in that weird time. Let's be real, especially like Crown tournaments. Weird time is like after the fight, but before the other court, where you're like, I guess we just wrestle in the middle of this gymnasium because we're not doing anything else? Like, setting up.
I normally drink, so.
I really thought you were going to be like, I'm normally getting ready for that court because we just won. Like, I just became queen again. So,
That's only happened twice.
so far. And, but, like, setting up like a chunk of time where like after lunch in the sort of lazy part of the day with a recorder where it's like, come on over and let's just do this. And Mellitus and I, somewhat unattached, but in a form that we've talked about having an area at Lily's with chunks of time and stuff like that. So.
Well, and we've tried to make it as accessible as possible, especially to our elder members. Like, if they don't do Zoom or have that, they can call one of us and record that way through a phone conversation.
You told people they could do that?
It's on there.
All right, you guys.
As a featured thing at Lily's too. I mean, like, I don't know when Lily's is going to happen. We're looking at October, and maybe early November, maybe September. But we can make it like an event that, you know, we send out as, you know, via social media as part of the Lily's schedule and everything. So
that would be wonderful.
That would be super cool.
All right, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and say thank you guys so much. Rhianwen, thank you for letting me pick your brain for a little bit. I hope that others find the stuff that you had to share helpful. Super. I did, and I know when I went on my tent making crusade, you helped me a lot. So I hope that for others, right? What? Oh, I'm still talking. Join me again next week. Next week I'll have Master Grimwolf with me to talk about Represé. I will try and get this recorded. I've been recording it the whole time, so hopefully it did that. And I will post it on Facebook, the link, as soon as I get that uploaded. But I miss you guys so much. Thank you for joining me today. And I'll see you next week.
Having us.
Love you guys.
Bye.
Bye.